Hey friends, I had a lovely morning working with a student and then doing some other work, and it was all just a kind of reminder of how blessed I am to do the work that I do. And a really kind of specific idea became really prominent in our conversation, and it actually then caused me to reflect on some reading that and some studying that I have done a long time ago, and various sort of thought leaders and philosophers and people that I was kind of into for a while. Because what came up in short, so I'll give you the context first, and then I'll kind of dig into the idea. But the context was a question about how to, what it means to change our life in a big way. In other words, maybe to leave behind a job that we've done for a long time. Of course, a job or a career can maybe only be one aspect of what we're leaving behind. There may be other changes that are equally significant or even more significant, but a lot of times that kind of professional upheaval is a pretty big one, because it's tied in with how we think we're going to survive, right? I mean, how we make our living is, if nothing else, in large part, how we create a sense of security. It's how we keep money coming in. That's how we keep the bills being paid. So making the decision to dislodge that, to change that in a big way, especially when we kind of maybe feel that we've gotten to the end of the usefulness of a particular path, and we really, for all kinds of personal and emotional and spiritual reasons, need to make a big change. Letting that go can be huge. So we were talking about that and what that means and all of that. So, but then what came up within that was a question like, well, it was like it comes in a variety of forms, but I mean, I'll just put it kind of in my own words, but like, who am I to not want to work anymore? Who am I, or what would I even do if I didn't do this job that I have anymore? And that's oftentimes when we're dealing with a big, profound life change like this. The mind often asks questions like that, and those questions are designed not to be answered, but to act as a kind of barrier between where we are and where we want to go. They're a kind of defense mechanism against the massive perceived or real risk of taking a plunge into the unknown. But this student / friend and brilliant person that I was working with was asking questions like that, and kind of saying, well, what does that even mean, that I don't want to do this job anymore? And what this flagged for me was a distinction that we don't often make. And this is where I was kind of reflecting on and reminded of the various thinkers that I've resonated with over the years, because there's a distinction between interior and exterior, right? We have an interiority. It's a reality. It's as real as the exterior world is. But we often don't acknowledge that. Ken Wilber was a philosopher who really kind of, one of his central outgoing statements, one of his like premises of so much of the work he did, was interior reality, bringing interiority, as he calls it, back online as a legitimate domain of investigation is absolutely vital for our culture. It's absolutely vital for our planet. And what Ken Wilber argues, in the sense of he's writing as a philosopher and a spiritual pioneer, and the way he puts it is that the interior domain can be investigated according to the scientific method just as thoroughly and just as effectively as the exterior domain. Because scientific method simply means observation, empirical observation, and experiments to demonstrate a hypothesis, and evidence, results that either refute or affirm the hypothesis and teach us new information. All of those things can be applied to the interior domain. And the way that he kind of caps it all off is by saying, if you actually talk to people who've done that, if you talk to monks, spiritual teachers, yogis, the people who are actually doing that work, by and large, they report finding the same things. Those things may be formulated within the language of different cultures. They may be the prism of images through that come through to a person who's grown up in a particular tradition might differ from the images and visions that might come through for someone who's grown up in a different culture. But by and large, you talk to mystics and they all report the same thing. They're not broadly in disagreement. Because to his mind, the interior domain can be effectively investigated and mapped just like the exterior domain. Just like if you run an experiment in a science lab in the exterior world and you get a result, that teaches you tangible, factual information. The same is true of the interior domain. Now, I realize I'm kind of on a tangent from where I started, but this came up in the conversation we were having, because essentially what my friend was saying is, I have this deep longing to do this other work and to just have time. I just don't want to work anymore. I don't want to do that job. And what showed up, and of course, that's the kind of thing where you say that in our culture, and it's like, well, what do you mean? You don't want to contribute anymore? You don't want to be part of you don't want to give your energy to society? But what struck me was that that's so backward. That's so not acknowledging what so many people are actually really feeling nowadays, which is, I don't want to do work that's strictly in the exterior anymore. I want to be able to do some of this other. I want to acknowledge that my interiority is actually a real thing. And I want to put my attention on that so that that can then be reflected in my exterior world. I mean, one of the things that Sadhguru said in this conference that I mentioned on a couple of my previous posts, he said, sustainability, this is on the context of a kind of climate change, save the soil speech. Sustainability and conscious action are the same thing. You can't have sustainability without conscious action. And what we're desperately, frantically, scramblingly trying to do, by and large, in our culture is to live unconsciously, to continue living compulsively, and just hope that technology or the government or some beneficent global agency or some group of experts somewhere are going to figure out how to make our unconscious action somehow amount to a sustainable use of the planet's resources. And of course, that's never going to happen. By the converse, conscious action is inherently sustainable. There there's no distinction between those two things. If we're acting fully consciously with a full awareness of all of the repercussions of our actions, that action will just naturally become a sustainable action. So we can approach this from either side, and in some ways we want to approach it from both. We don't want to strictly limit ourselves to the interior side of the coin and not think about what we're doing in the exterior. But by the same token, and in some ways more importantly in our society, I think we don't want to just keep all of our focus in the exterior and ignore that interior, which is in so many ways the source of all of everything that's being reflected in the outside world. If we look around the world, if we actually take seriously the proposition that the exterior world is a reflection of our interior world, then what we look around and see, we have to acknowledge that it exists within us, that we're being given this reflection for a reason. That's what we're projecting into space-time. So in that context, the impulse to say, I just don't want to work anymore at a job that doesn't give me the opportunity to connect, to really kind of cultivate conscious action and to really live from that place. In fact, it's a distraction from that work. The demands of this job are very counter to that type of inner work. It makes total sense to say I don't want to work anymore. And not only is that not a kind of abdication of responsibility, it's actually claiming the deepest possible work we could do. We're saying I don't want to spend all my time on something that's not making me more conscious, on something that's not bringing me into deeper and deeper alignment with myself and therefore with the world, and become a more conscious member of the global society. So that all showed up this morning in a wonderful conversation, and I was just so gratified that to this student and to the moment for that conversation coming up. And it really did kind of rekindle an interest in some of these thinkers and writers that I've spent time studying, and it kind of brought me back into a recognition of how important that is. The distinction between interiority and exteriority, and where we do our work, and what that work is, and how they're absolutely connected and entwined, but also not the same thing, right? They're not the same thing. We do need our focus. We need to spend enough time on each one so that we have a holistic view of things. So yeah, that's what showed up today. Thanks for listening, folks. My daughter is downstairs crying. She refused to take a nap. I'm going to go take care of that. I appreciate you. Thank you for watching. Love you. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you soon.